Good evening, everyone. This is Bishop Cynthia Fierro Harvey. Thank you for joining us today and for your commitment to be with us and to learn a little bit more about annual conference. What a unique time that we're in. Who would have ever thought this is how we would be doing annual conference? But I know that you will be blessed this evening by the leadership of David Wood and his team. And they're really a committed group of people. I've had the privilege of working with GNTV and other projects and have always just felt welcomed by them and grace-filled by their presence. So what I'd like to do today is have you make sure that you listen carefully, that you pass on this information to your friends. Even if you think you know how to do Zoom, there's always something new to learn. And this isn't a Zoom meeting per se. So there's always something for us to learn in these situations. And you're learning from some real pros. So what I'd like to do is open with a word of prayer. And then I'm going to step aside and let you listen and learn from one another. You'll get instructions about how to ask questions. And basically you're practicing a little bit already for annual conference. So again, thank you for being here. There's quite a few of you already on, so I know there's many more yet to come. And one other thing, if there's other sessions after this one, so if you still have questions or you still don't get it, or you might just need a little refresher, go on the website and check out when these gatherings are again. And I know for me, sometimes it takes more than once for me to get it. So I know that you might want to do that to be sure that you know exactly what to do when we get to the annual conference session. So is it okay with you, David, if I go ahead and open us with a word of prayer?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's pray. Gracious God, for this day, we give thanks for the privilege that we have to gather around this virtual table. We thank you. You entrust so much to us, oh God. And we take this responsibility seriously. So as we gather today, keep our hearts, our minds, and our ears open to the movement of your Spirit. Keep us mindful that this work is holy work. It's holy conferencing. It's not just a business session that we're about, but it is about doing sacred work that you entrust to us this day and the day after and day after day after day. So be with us. Be with us. Help us to be kind, gentle, and patient as we navigate this new way of being together. For this, we give thanks. And for all those gathered around this virtual table, we especially give thanks. Amen.
Thank you very much, Bishop Harvey. It is my pleasure to be here with you today. My name is David Wood, and I am the Executive Director of GNTV Media Ministry. I'm an elder in the South Georgia Annual Conference, and this is my appointment. We're a ministry that specializes in working with annual conferences. Typically, we work with 16 annual conferences each year. This year, we've worked with 25 annual conferences to help them have a virtual annual conference experiment. You all are near the end of these experiments, and they have gone very well in other places. And so tonight we're going to look at what we've learned and how our team of 7 that is here with you tonight can help you be successful. So we have some tech support people standing by if it doesn't go smoothly, and we'll talk through the way it functions and what we do for voting, which is a web-based voting system outside of the Zoom webinar. So let's take a look at our agenda for this evening. So we're going to first start by looking at the features of the Zoom webinar. We're going to look at the different roles, and then we'll talk about the chat feature, the raise hand feature, and the question and answer feature. Then we'll turn our attention to what GNTV provides through the voting system, and we will actually take some practice ballots tonight. And finally, we'll make sure that you know how to get a hold of our GNTV tech support team. We want to help you be successful, and our team is well equipped to make that possible. So this is a Zoom webinar. It works a little differently than a Zoom meeting. We cannot see your camera, and your microphone is not turned on right now. But you can see myself, you could see the bishop earlier, you'll be able to see the slides and the videos that are part of the presentations. This is much the same way that the annual conference sessions are going to work. You will be seeing what is happening in real time, and we will all be working through it together. You will be using some of the features of this Zoom webinar platform to interact and participate just like you do at an in-person annual conference. So the first thing we need to do is try and find some icons. All of you need to be able to find 3 icons. Those are the chat, the raise hand, and the Q&A icon. You may not be familiar with all of these if you've only done Zoom meetings, but these are the icons that the attendees can see in a Zoom webinar. So on your computer, you may need to move your mouse over the screen above the Zoom application window in order to see these icons appear across the bottom of the screen. On a Surface or an iPad, you may have to double tap on the screen to get these menu items to appear. And then particularly on some cell phones, on iPhones or Android devices, you're going to have to do an extra step. There may be 3 bars or 3 dots in the corner on some of these devices that you have to click on in order to pull up a menu that has the features you are looking for. So the first feature we're going to talk about tonight is the chat feature. The chat feature is going to be disabled for conversation, but it will be enabled to allow announcements to be made. The announcements that will be made throughout this annual conference and this training will be helpful to everyone. It'll be information about how to reach our tech support team, information about how to get to the voting site, and links to particular materials that are important for you during the annual conference or the clergy session. So we are preparing both tonight for the clergy session and the annual conference session. This training is applicable to both, so if you're a layperson and you're here and you hear me talk about the clergy session, that's only because it's coming up this week. You are in the right place and you will learn all the important details. So, the chat icon. All of you should be looking for this chat icon right now, and we've placed a sample announcement there. So look for that chat icon. If you're on a cell phone, remember you may have to click on 3 bars or 3 dots to pull up a menu that has these keywords on it. It's just a sample announcement, but you're going to want to learn how to keep an eye on those particular items so that you can be aware of the important information being shared as announcements through the chat feature. The second feature we're going to look at tonight is the raise hand feature. So the raise hand feature will be used to help our tech team find you in the attendee area. When you are recognized by the bishop, that is when we will ask you to raise your hand. Let me clarify that. Not when you want to be recognized, but when you are in fact called upon by the bishop. The way you'll get called upon is through the Q&A, the question and answer feature. And we're going to talk about exactly how to do that here shortly. But once you're called upon by the bishop, you will be invited to raise your hand so that our team can quickly find you and invite you to speak. So right now, I'm going to invite all of you to find this raise hand icon. It should appear white or gray on your device and say the words raise hand. Some of you are getting the hang of this already. I would love for all of you to raise your hand by clicking on that icon and leaving it up. I want you to notice 2 things when you click on that icon. It changes to be blue or green, and the words change to say lower hand. This is the way you know that your hand is raised and that you are asking to be recognized following the bishop calling on you. This just helps us. One of the things we also can do is to lower all the hands. Now, I can see that about 80% of you have now been able to raise your hand. So I'd love to see the rest of you raise your hand. I'm going to see a few hands going down. I want to show you one other feature that can only happen when your hand is raised. The lower all hands feature lowers everyone's hand. And I'm going to ask my team right now to lower all of your hands. So you will notice that your hand has gone down and that you are now back at the default position. So when your hand is down, it is white or gray and says raise hand. When your hand is up, it is blue or green and says lower hand. So what happens after you raise your hand and you're ready to be recognized? Well, our team is going to prompt you to speak. And in order to speak, you have to agree by clicking on a button that says unmute myself. So right now, I'm going to call on Sherry Goodwin to raise her hand. And Sherry is going to hopefully talk to us here in just a second. Right now, she is being prompted with that unmute myself button on her screen. And I can see that she's agreed. How are you doing tonight, Sherry?
I'm wonderfully blessed.
That is fantastic. Can you tell me what church you're affiliated with and what city you're in tonight?
I am affiliated with Williams Ross United Methodist Church in New Orleans.
That is fantastic. So will this be your first time to attend annual conference?
No,
How many times have you been to annual conference?
about 15 times.
That's a pretty good track record from my perspective. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So was it easy for you to unmute yourself tonight?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any questions for me about what I've presented on so far?
No, I don't.
Okay. Well, I thank you very much for talking with me tonight, and I hope you have a great evening.
Thank you.
So once Sherry has finished speaking, her speaking privileges are going to expire. Much like you walk to a microphone at an in-person annual conference, when you're finished speaking, when your time has expired, the microphone is turned off. That is the same thing that happens in this virtual model. That doesn't mean that Sherry can't be recognized again and speak at a later point in the annual conference session, but it does mean that she can't speak without being recognized. And so Sherry has lost her ability to speak. So, I can see several of you have questions. I can't actually see you, but I bet you have questions about how do I get recognized by the bishop. And that is where we're going to turn our attention to this Q&A feature. So this Q&A feature is the way that you are going to get recognized. You're going to ask your questions. You're going to ask informational questions, technical questions. You're going to also be able to use this Q&A feature to make a motion, to make an amendment, to second a motion or an amendment, to move the previous question or call the previous question, some people call it, to offer a second or make a point of order, or request to make a speech, or even request a moment of personal privilege. All the things you do by raising your hand and attempting to be recognized at an in-person annual conference, you do through making your request to be recognized through the Q&A. So let's take a look at some examples of how exactly you go about that. So first, let's say you'd like to make a motion. If you want to make a motion, we are going to ask you to open the Q&A, type the word motion, and then we want you to insert the text of your motion. We are going to ask you to include the exact wording of how you would like the motion to appear. This is helpful in two reasons. First, it allows our tech team to prepare a slide that all of you joining this virtual annual conference can see and review so you know what the motion is about. Second, this allows your bishop and the conference secretaries to know the same thing. They know exactly what the motion is asking to do and can be clear about the language being used. Let's say you like a motion that comes before the body. You would type second the motion. You can second the motion so that you move it along in the parliamentary process. After a motion's been seconded and perhaps some debate and questions have been asked, perhaps you want to make an amendment. If you wanted to make an amendment, you do much the same thing you do to make a motion. You type the word amendment, then you insert the text of your amendment, and then you need to provide a little extra information. We need to know where your amendment goes, whether that's a page, a paragraph, a sentence, a line number, or other identifying information about where your amendment is being placed or replacing a particular passage. In addition to an amendment, you can do the other kinds of things. You may want to ask to make a speech for a particular amendment or a motion, a speech against a particular amendment or motion. You may want to call the question, which brings debate to a close. You may want to make a point of order. We would ask that you insert your point of order, that you type out what it is, and that hopefully you reference a standing rule or a book of discipline paragraph in your point of order so it is clear what you are basing that on. And then finally, you may want to request a moment of personal privilege. A moment of personal privilege is something like a prayer request or the desire for the conference to send greetings to someone who is unable to attend. These are the things you do through the Q&A feature. Right now, we are all going to take that Q&A feature for a test drive. I can see that a few of you are already off to that process, but I would like for all 78 of you who are here tonight to use the Q&A feature right now, if you have not already. So, I would invite you to open the Q&A feature. I would ask you to click on the text box at the bottom, and I would like for you to tell me the name of your church and your city at the very least. If you have a question, feel free to include that question as part of your submission. Some of you have already been practicing motions. One of you made a motion that all new United Methodist buildings be painted purple. Another one of you made a motion that we should have ice cream delivered to all attendees at the end of the session. Those are both pretty interesting motions. One of my favorite motions is that everybody who attends annual conference should get pizza provided to them by the annual conference. Just a personal favorite motion. So, you all are here. I can see you are responding. That is fantastic. About 2/3 of you have submitted at this point, and that number is growing pretty rapidly, so that's fantastic. I now need all of you who've finished submitting to do something for me. In that Q&A box, I would like to invite you to look at your submission. So go and find where your question, where your statement has gone, and look at what's above that. Do you see your name? If you are seeing your name above your submission, then that means that you have one of the most current versions of the Zoom application, and you are going to be in good shape. While you're looking at your name, I need you to check and make sure that you have a full name there and one that the conference would recognize. So there are a few of you here tonight with only first names, and there are a couple of you here who I think may be planning to watch in a small group with church names. So let's talk about that. When you joined this session tonight, if you received a pop-up box and were asked for a name and an email address, we need you to enter your full name and your email address, hopefully the one that the conference is going to recognize. This is how they make sure that someone in the meeting is appropriately there and has voice and vote during the annual conference session. However, If you did not get that pop-up to enter your name and an email, this means you have a Zoom account. Many of you who are here tonight probably have a Zoom account at this point. Several of you that have church names in there most likely do have a Zoom account. It would be helpful if you're watching by yourself that you edit your Zoom account to have your full name in the profile settings. You will have to do that after this session. You cannot update it during this session and have it take effect. But if you have a Zoom account and you're only seeing your first name or a business name or a church name, you have two options. One is to go into your Zoom profile and edit your name. The other is to sign out of your Zoom account before joining the annual conference session. And then you'll get the pop-up box to enter your name and your email address. So, the second option is if you are intending to watch with a small group at a church, it's great if we have the church name as your name. What we're going to ask you to do is modify the way you submit through the Q&A slightly. So if you are watching as part of a small group and you want to ask a question, you don't each have to have your own device, but you do need to let us know who's going to be asking the question. So if you're, for example, from Grace UMC and you are one of the lay delegates, you would start your submission with your name and then what you want to do, perhaps a motion and to provide pizza to everybody. So you would include your name as part of your submission. That helps us make sure that we are recognizing people who are appropriately here. I'm sure some of you heard earlier this year about Zoom bombing, and that has been a significant issue, but Zoom has made some great upgrades and helped alleviate most of that issue. One of the things that means is that we need all of you on a version of the Zoom application that has been released since May 31st of this year. So when you leave this session tonight, if you're prompted to upgrade your Zoom, we encourage you to do that. The other thing is if you're not seeing your name in the Q&A feature, if it is saying my question or the word you, like you, then you need to update your Zoom. You have an older version of the Zoom application, and we need you to have a more recent version in order to fully participate. What happens is, if you were to get recognized and the bishop called on you and you were asked to speak, you would be unable to speak if you have one of those older applications. That was one of the security holes that Zoom has fixed. And in order to speak, you must have a version of the Zoom application that has been released since May 31st. So let's see if you have any questions in the Q&A area. So Kendall asks, I'm curious what the three dots at the upper left of the screen are for. Well, I would encourage you to click on those three dots and see. My guess is they open a menu with some settings that might be helpful for you. It does depend which type of device you are on, what the three dots mean. Bernadette says she's updated her Zoom software. That is fantastic. Okay, if the name is spelled out and has you listed, then you are fine. You are on a new enough version that there is no issue with that. And Kimberly, I just explained that one of the easiest ways to tell which version of Zoom you're on is to look at the name in your Q&A submission. The easiest way to update your Zoom, if you need to do that, is after this meeting, go to your Zoom application, and in most cases, there's an option to update your Zoom. So just go there and look under your file menu or your settings if you're on a Mac, and you can update your Zoom by clicking something like check for updates or update my Zoom. Those are some keywords to look for. Okay. You all are off to a great start. There aren't a ton of technical questions, and that is great to hear. So we are going to turn our attention to the voting system. So GNTV provides a voting system that is a web-based voting system. The GNTV voting system needs to be accessed through a web browser. That is something like Safari, Firefox, Microsoft Edge, Google Chrome, or Internet Explorer. You will need to have one of these programs. It may be helpful for you to do the voting on a second device. You may want to use a cell phone or a tablet in order to vote on. We are going to ask you to go to the web page vote.gntv.info, and that will load the GNTV online balloting system. So let's walk through the steps of casting a ballot. We're going to do this a couple times before we take our first practice ballot. So you open your web browser, you go to vote.gntv.info. On the first page, you are going to be prompted to enter a ballot code. We are going to give you the ballot code in the webinar each time you are ready to vote. So we will share that information with you. It will be in red and on the screen. After you enter the ballot code, you're going to want to click that green Load Ballot button. After loading the ballot, you will be taken to the actual ballot page. On this page, you are going to be prompted to enter a voter ID. We're going to talk more about that voter ID in just a minute or two, so don't freak out about it yet. I'm going to help you with that. And then you'll be asked to make your selection. And after you make your selection, you are going to want to click the blue Submit button. After clicking the blue Submit button, click that green Return to Start button, and you will be ready for the next ballot. So right now, I'd like to invite all of you to watch a short video that walks you through what these steps might look like on a computer.
Welcome to GNTV's member training for the online balloting website. Each of you should receive a voter ID number in your email inbox. Please have your number ready for the online balloting process. If you have not received a voter ID, you will be provided one to practice with. Don't worry, keep an eye on your email. Your voter ID should be arriving soon. If available, we recommend using a second device for the online balloting website, so you are able to follow along with the Zoom webinar during the voting process without switching between programs. The online balloting website is separate from the Zoom webinar. To begin, please open a web browser such as Google Chrome, Firefox, Safari, Microsoft Edge, or Internet Explorer. In your web browser, go to the web address vote.gntv.info. This will bring you to our online balloting website. The link to the online balloting website is also posted in Zoom's chat feature. When it is time to vote, the ballot code will be announced and shown in red on your screen in Zoom. At this time, you can enter the ballot code on the balloting website. Please take care to enter the ballot code exactly as it is shown on screen, or you will receive an invalid ballot error message. After entering the ballot code, please click the green Load Ballot button. On the second page of the ballot, please enter your voter ID number by clicking on the Your Answer box, and then make your selection on the ballot. After selecting your answer, click the blue Submit button at the bottom of the ballot. After submitting your ballot, you will receive a message letting you know that your vote has been recorded. Click the green Return to Start button at the top of the page to prepare for the next ballot.
Okay, we are preparing to take our first practice vote, but before we do that, I want to share with you our tech support phone number. That tech support phone number is 478-245-4042. I would invite you to make a note of this, to write it down, to take a picture of the screen, to tape it to your favorite monitor, to write it on your favorite notepad so that you know where this number is, so that we can help you be successful. You may also find this number on the bottom of every ballot slide and in the chat. We will post it there as an announcement. Okay. We are preparing to take our first practice ballot, but before I do that, I want to say a couple words about your voter ID. So at this point, the Louisiana Conference, through assistance from GNTV, has distributed voter IDs to individuals who have voting rights in the clergy session. The laity voter IDs have not been shared yet, and the clergy who only have voting rights in the annual conference session have not received their ID either. But today, clergy should have all received an email. It was sent out this afternoon, and you will want to go look for that. You can do that now, you can do that after this session. But the subject line of that message was Clergy Session Important Details. And if you had a voter ID, it went on to say, and voter ID. Now, as a reminder, unfortunately, all of our clergy do not have the ability to vote in the clergy session because of the rules and the structure of the United Methodist Church. But anyone who is eligible received an email today with their voter ID. So those messages have been shared today. If you cannot find this message, please look in your spam or junk folder. We have found that occasionally they do end up there. And I know you all have been asked to add the web address for this to your contacts list. That web address is vote@gntv.info, and we will share that in the chat also. So if you add that to your contacts list, it should help these not end up in your spam or junk folder in the future. So this week we have shared the information for clergy session. Next week we will be sharing on Tuesday or Wednesday the information for the annual conference session. So next week, laity, if you are here, you should have an email by midday on Wednesday at the very latest. That will have a very similar topic. It will say annual conference, important details, and voter ID if you have a voter ID. So tonight, all of you can practice voting with our practice voter ID. You do not have to have your voter ID in order to be able to participate in the training tonight. Okay, here we go. We are going to turn our attention to our first practice ballot. So I would like you to answer the question, do you thank God for virtual conferencing? And you will notice that there is no ballot code yet on the screen. We follow the lead of the bishop to open and close the ballot. And so tonight, I'm going to open the ballot. You should notice now that a ballot code is going to appear in the top left corner. When the bishop opens the ballot code will appear in the corner, and it will remain there while the ballot is open. So the ballot code we're going to use tonight at vote.gntv.info is AG001. That's like agape 001. It does not matter if it's lowercase or uppercase or a combination. It's simply that you must have the letters and the numbers in that order. Okay, so you have AG001 and you click the green Load Ballot button On the next page, you will see some words voter ID, and then just below that, you're going to see a spot that says your answer. We are going to invite you to click on the words that say your answer and enter either your voter ID, if you have that for the clergy session, or the test voter ID that you see on the screen. That test voter ID is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. So I invite you to enter your voter ID and then make your choice. And then click that blue submit button at the bottom of the screen. After you click your blue submit button, you can scroll up, especially if you're on a portable device, and see a confirmation message that things have gone well. If things have gone well, then you will want to click that green Return to Start button. If you get an error message, you will want to work through fixing that error. And I'm going to give you 30 seconds to work through this process. Okay, we are preparing to close this ballot. I'm going to give you a little bit longer, and I'd invite you to raise your hand if you are still working on this process. So just raise your hand. Let us know that you are still working. That will help us make sure that we get a sense for how people are doing with this. There are a few of you with hands raised still. I'm going to give you about 5 more seconds. If this has not gone well for you, I am going to invite you to call our tech support line. And so I'm going to declare this ballot closed. So what happens is that you are going to have to wait a little bit while we tabulate the results and prepare the slide. During this time, there may be some announcements or information shared, or simply a logo and music. Tonight, I'd like to talk with you briefly about your voter ID. Voter IDs are unique to you. We do not want you to share your voter ID. We do not want you to make this available to anyone else, because our system is designed to allow you to fix a mistaken vote. Perhaps you remember earlier there might have been a motion about some pizza. So if a motion for pizza was before the body and perhaps an amendment came up where anchovies should be an option for the pizza, we might take a vote on that. Now, you heard the word anchovies and you were probably like, no. But you might have missed the word option. And you're probably okay with the option of anchovies, but you immediately voted no to anchovies. But then realized, I could vote yes. It's okay if they're an option as long as I don't have to eat them. So you would want to go back and make a second submission. Your second submission would replace your first submission. Your first submission is then recorded as being erased by your second submission when the ballot closes. So this allows you to correct a mistaken vote. That is why we ask you not to share your voter ID. Now, there is a situation in where you may want to share your voter ID. We've seen this in small group settings where a few members of a church gather together to watch as a group. If you gather together as a group, it may be okay for you to share your voter ID with someone who's going to be on a device and helping make voting work smoothly for everybody. One of my favorite stories was a group that gathered in a church in Montana, and a 14-year-old granddaughter came along that day, and she handled the voting for all of them so that things could be a little easier that day for those delegates. That is appropriate, but only with someone you trust who you know is going to vote the way you want to vote. So, our results are ready. Let's take a look at those. So, a total of 69 ballots were cast. 35 were needed for a majority. 65 of you said you do thank God for virtual conferencing, and that's 94.2%. That is pretty fantastic. In fact, that might be the highest result we've seen yet in one of these training sessions. That is great. I do think virtual conferencing and virtual worship services offer a lot of opportunity for us as a church. I know my family has started attending on most Sundays 3 different church services as part of our Sunday morning routine. We get to participate with some family that are in different states and see some friends who are leading another service. And it has been amazing to have that multi-church experience on a regular basis. So let's take another practice question. And this time I'd like to know a little bit more about you. Do you have pets? So I'm going to declare this ballot open. And now you will need to go to vote.gntv.info, and you will want to enter the ballot code AG002. That is AG002. After you enter your ballot code, click that green Load Ballot button. If this is not going smoothly for you, please call our tech support line right now. You can find that number in the chat. It is available to you. It is also available on the screen. After loading the ballot, click on the words that say your answer and type in your voter ID. That number is 123457, or your personal voter ID. All of those will work tonight. And then answer the question and click that blue submit button. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to work through this process. Okay, we are preparing to close this ballot. I'm going to give you about 15 more seconds. I would love to see any of you raise your hand who have not been able to finish this process. That is always helpful for me to just get a sense of how we're doing. There are fewer hands this time than last time. That is fantastic, exactly the way we want to be going. I know a few of you have called our tech support line. That is fantastic. We want to help you be successful. Okay, I'm going to declare this ballot closed. We're going to begin the tabulation process, and we're going to start the work of preparing the slide. If this has not worked for you, please call our tech support team. We would be very happy to work with you to be successful at this process. If you'll have some patience with how this works, I think we can help you be successful. One of my favorite stories is about a 91-year-old retired minister here in the South Georgia Annual Conference. I've known him pretty much my entire life, since I was about 3 years old. He's never owned a smartphone, never owned a computer, still occasionally asked to do a funeral, and types that message on a typewriter. But when he heard that annual conference was going to be held virtually, he told his family that he needed to be able to attend. They helped him buy an iPad, and they thought they'd come and help him attend. That was not his plan. He figured out the iPad and how to join the sessions and how to attend by getting some Wi-Fi access. And then he came to these practice sessions. And just like Bishop Harvey invited you, come back if this isn't going well. Have another go at it between now and annual conference. And if you'll call our tech support team, much like that 91-year-old retired minister, I think we can help you be successful. He attended clergy session and annual conference. He voted on every ballot. He didn't even need his grandchildren to come sit with him that day and help him be successful. He took care of it himself. And we're willing to help you be that successful. So, please give us a call and let us help you. Let's take a look at our results. Turns out that a majority of you own pets. That is fantastic. So, interestingly enough, you are almost right on the average. 60% is our average, which is where we typically see the answer to this question fall. I do want to point out that we had one invalid vote on this ballot. You need to make sure that you enter your voter ID exactly as it's provided to you. This is extremely important. Our system requires you to enter the voter ID correctly. So make sure that you do that. Okay, we're going to take one more practice ballot, and we're going to pick up the pace just a little bit for this last practice ballot. Is your church holding virtual worship services? This includes hybrid, where you're partially in person, partially online, all of the options that are virtual. I'm going to declare this ballot open, and you will see the ballot code appear on the screen. The ballot code is AG003. You're going to enter that at vote.gntv.info. You're going to click the Load Ballot button. Then you're going to click the test under voter ID. You're going to click on the words Your Answer to enter your voter ID. That can be the test voter ID. That test voter ID is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. And then answer the question, is your church holding virtual worship services? And click that blue Submit button. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to work through this process. Okay, we are preparing to close this ballot. There's been a question asked about a countdown on voting, so we'll know how much time you have to submit your vote. We don't generally do that. We do generally provide about 1 minute from start to finish. We have found that most people can vote in the first 20 to 30 seconds, so that has been a sufficient amount of time. The music we play is generally 30 seconds, so as the music ends, you will know that that time is coming to a close. And so we are preparing to close this ballot, and it is closed. I want to remind you as we're waiting on these results about the Q&A feature. The way you get recognized, the way you participate fully in this annual conference experience is through the Q&A feature. We can see you having submitted questions that can be answered by our tech team, by the conference staff. You can submit questions of the presenters about things like the budget and nominations. You can also bring motions and amendments to the floor so that you can fully participate. You can speak to those motions and amendments. You can use your voice much like you would do at an in-person session while you are attending this annual conference. So, we are preparing to come to an end tonight, and our results are ready. Let's take a look at our results. Okay, turns out that you all are doing a lot of virtual worship. That is fantastic. Now, I'm probably a little biased because I work for a ministry that has definitely specialized in virtual worship. We've been doing it since 2014, but I do believe that this has been a shift in our society, and churches that don't have some form of online presence are going to struggle in the future as we move ahead. So I encourage you to think about how your church can have a meaningful and powerful online presence. And I guess with that said, William has made the motion that we should adjourn for the night, and I assume that we'll get a second for that if anyone else is listening. So thank you very much for being here this evening. I hope you all get to have some dinner and have a nice evening, and I hope you are well prepared for the annual conference sessions to come. If you need help, call our tech team. We're going to be here and we'll be able to help you in the days that lie ahead and during the annual conference sessions that are to come. Have a great night.